Hello everyone, welcome. Today I'm creating this video to go over a topic that I usually don't go into that much in my intro to web design class. The reason why we don't go over it is because there's limited time and usually we cover this um, in the other two semesters of web development, CIS 271 and 275. So since we're covering it there, most of the times I skip this topic so that we have room to talk about other things. So anyway, some of you requested a lecture on this. You wanted to learn a little bit more because it seems pretty confusing. So I decided, let me record a video, to allow you to learn about that topic. So here we go. I'm gonna share my screen. Um, with you. And right now, I have a document already created. Now, to really get the most out of this video, you should understand a couple of things already. You should understand how to create a basic HTML template for your pages, and you should be able to understand how to deal with attributes um, for your tags, um, such as the ID or the class attribute. If you don't know that too much, it's okay. I'll go over it more or less here, but we're going to deal with a lot of attributes here. All right. I'm not going to go over every possible tag for a form, but I'll do the main ones, and then I'll show you where to go to, learn a little bit more about the others. So we have the main document here, right? Using our common tags, doc type, HTML, we have the language set to English, and then we separated our document into head and body. Head has document information such as the title and the meta with the UTF-8 character set. We're naming this page register now. Then we have other parts of the page, the content. We have the header, the nav, the main, and the footer, where we could put information, right? We could put some copyright information here on the paragraph. Or a heading, depending on how important you're seeing this. So n% copy, copyright 2021. Oops, I don't have numlock on. Right, so something like that. I can put Professor Rodriguez here. The header might, that's where you would put your logo and your information. So we'll say register now as well, matching the title because it's a registration page. The navigation bar is where you put your navigational links, and the main area is where you would have the main content for your website. So actually a better idea here might be to have the name of your website, my website name, um, and then down here we'll have an H2 because it's under my website, right? It's a category of my website. So we would call this register now. So I will share, again, this is usually something I cover in the 275. So I'm gonna kind of use my own slides over here. And I'll also provide this for those of you who are following along on our Blackboard shell. So the first thing is that HTML forms are used to get input from the user, right? That's where it's really allows the user to interact with your page. HTML forms a container tag that has many other components inside of it, right? So we're gonna have that form tag and then we're gonna put a bunch of things inside of it. So for example, here we have first name, last name, and a submit button, and those three things are all part of the form. Um, Now, to create form tag, we're going to use this format. It's a form, right? Just as we would assume. That's the name of the tag. And there's two attributes that we need to provide. The first one is method, and the second one is action. Now, the method of your form can be two possible values. It could be get or it could be post. A get method, if we use a get method, whenever we click submit and we go to the next page that accepts this data, then the data that you send will actually display as part of the URL to your page. If you send it as post, the data is hidden from the user. It's sent to the server who receives your data through a file. Okay, now usually you should use get if it's a page that you want people to be able to bookmark or get back to, but doesn't contain any personal information. Passwords, usernames, those should not be included on a get. Um, a post would be used for something that's more secure, like something that sends a password, username, maybe even like phone number, credit card info. You don't want those to show. And the action is the file in the server that is going to process that data. Usually it's a PHP file. It can't just be an HTML file because HTML doesn't know how to process that data. It needs to be a file that can do something with it, right? That can take that data and then maybe store it in a database, maybe save it to some file, maybe you'll send you an email with the information that people typed, or maybe logging the user by comparing information to a database. It's a little bit more advanced and needs you to understand how to program a little bit more in order to be able to actually write PHP, which is why this is our second one of the second level courses, second semester, second year courses. All right. But anyway, so this PHP file is what's going to play with the actual data. So today we're not going to go into that because that's more advanced. However, we will talk about just creating that form. Now, if you're using another tool like a website creator, it's still important for you to know how to set up the form, but then that tool, that website creator will decide what this action and this method is for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But you still might be able to edit the form, so it's nice to understand how to create those. Okay, so that's the idea here. Uh, Now, whenever we're dealing with anything on a form, we want to make sure that our forms are accessible, that everyone can use it. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to include something called the label tag. The label tag pretty much associates a piece of text or content with your with an element on your form. Okay, so we're going to use these labels to help our users enter that data, because those users might be using something like a screen reader, right? The screen reader will read that label out for the user if they are hovering over the form element, so they understand what the element is, what that input field is. And it allows the input to be selected when the label is clicked. So if I click on the label, it also selects the field. This is important because if people are using their phones in order to do this, right? Especially with radio buttons, as we'll see, it's difficult to click on the little circle on your phone. It's easier to click on the text next to it. So if we click on the text, it would also select the radio button. That's another reason why we want this label. Now, to create a label, it's very important that we use a new attribute called for. So basically what we're gonna do, whenever we create an input, we're gonna provide an ID, and the label we're gonna associate it with that input by using the for attribute. So this is the label for ID of input. So the input with ID of input will be the one that associates with this label. We'll see this in action in a moment. Now, before we go into all the input types, let's get started here creating the form. So again, the form is a container. So we're going to start the form and end the form. This will have elements inside of it. Again, I said there's two attributes. The order doesn't matter. You can place action first, method first, doesn't matter. So notice there's two options, get and post. We're going to say get for now. Actually, let's say post because we're gonna send a password. And action equals, then we'll say, you know, I don't know, process.php. It would be a name of the file on your server that will do this for you. So there you go. Now we have a form element. Now, if you look at this screen, if you look at this website, right, then you won't see anything. Let me go there. Um, Forms. If I open these on my browser, I don't see anything. And you're not supposed to because it's a container. The container only has, space if you type something in it. So we haven't typed anything in it, so we can't see anything. So anyway, let's create our first input. So we'll create a label. Now we haven't named it yet, but we can imagine what we're gonna create. So let's say the first thing we wanna have is we want the user to enter a username. So I'll create a label for username, and I'm going to close the label right here. Now, what I'm going to do is that inside of this label, I'm gonna put two things. The first thing I'm gonna do is put username, colon. And then, usually I do it in another line, I'm going to put my input over here. Um, and this input, we just know, must have an ID that matches these four. So the ID is username. So this label is for username. And how do we know which input is username? Because we give it an ID. Okay, so the for matches the ID. Now, when we choose an input, there are several types of input. That's an attribute you must provide. What type of input are you providing? Now, a username, it's just text that we need. So we're gonna say input type equals text and ID equals username. So this is a self-closing tag because it has no actual contents, and we can refresh and notice that now it says username column and then the field for the username. Now notice how I created this label. When you are creating, if you are looking up information online, if you're looking at websites, if you're looking at other YouTube videos, usually you will see the label being closed above. You'll see the label being closed right here after username, and then you're gonna see the input after. That's okay as well. That works for the most part. The reason why I don't like doing that, it's because sometimes these ads a very small inconsistency in your code, because now if I have the page like that, in some browsers, in some situations, if I'm clicking on a phone and I accidentally click the middle, nothing happens. Like between the column and the input, if I click that space, absolutely nothing happens. If I click on username, notice that it highlights the field. That's what the label is for. If I click on the username, it highlights the field. If I hover over the field, it's going to read the text on the label. So that's how they are associated. If I hover over here, it reads the text. If I click on it, it selects it. But by doing it with a label followed by the input after it, if I click on this space, then nothing happens. That could happen on the phone. You accidentally click and you click right there in that middle. So nothing gets selected. So I like to deal with that by just making the label be the whole thing being a label, including the input. This now, if I save and I refresh my page, if I click right here in the middle, notice that it actually selects the input field as well. So that's something I do different. But I mean, I feel like this is more user friendly than if we do them separately. So you see me writing it like this. So anyway, going back to our input type equals text. We give it an ID of username. Now there is a few other attributes that we might want to deal with. One of the attributes is the name. Now, the name, it might not, especially at the 170 level, it might not be as important because you're not dealing with the PHP file. However, when you deal with the PHP, the way that you retrieve the data is by this name. For those of you who have done programming before, this is like your variable name. This will be basically the name of your variable in PHP. More or less, that's what it is. Okay, so in this case, name should be usually the same as the ID. So we're gonna say name equals username. And then we can add other attributes that might be useful. These are the most important: type, ID, and name, at least for the text input. Other inputs, we're gonna require a value as well. So we provide those three, and then we can have um, other um, attributes that might help us. So for example, one attribute is placeholder. The placeholder is the placeholder text. So for example, enter your username, enter a username. Um, like that, and whatever I type in placeholder is gonna show up as that text behind. It's kind of behind the field. It's not really occupying the field. It's just there so you can type something else on top of it, right? Most forms nowadays, they don't even have the label show up like this. They hide the label, and instead they just have these, right? Some of the forms nowadays. Now, in order to make it accessible, they will hide the label somewhere else, or they will just hide it completely from the page, and but it'll still be read by the screen readers. But anyway, we'll leave it with the label for now. So refresh username. All right. So I think those are the most common right now. There's other things that you can decide, like you can set an attribute for the maximum width, for the minimum width, right? So if you're putting a password that you want to have a minimum, like 4 digits, you can do that as well. But that's the idea here. So if I show you the slides again, there are lots and lots of input types. So again, most of them follow the same type of format, right? So input type equals button, input type equals checkbox, color, date, date time, local, email, file, hidden image, month, number, password, radio, range, reset, search, submit, tell, text, time, URL, and week. So again, I'm not going to sit here and lecture you on all of them. I'll show the most common. I showed you text. I'm going to show you password. I'm going to show you email. I'm going to show you submit. And then the checkbox and the radio button. That's the goal here. So again, the text input should have the type, text, the ID, whatever you want to call it, and the name. Usually the ID and the name are the same. Now, by the way, I forgot to mention, but the ID needs to be unique. Only one thing in your page should have that ID, nothing else. Okay? The ID makes it unique. The name, there could be multiple things with the same name. We'll see that. Now, before we go into other ones, let's do the submit button. To do the submit button, again, it's the type equals submit. That one doesn't necessarily need a name or an ID because it's kind of by itself, right? But it needs what we call the value. So let's see it in action, right? So again, this one, it's the submit button. The purpose of the submit button is to send your form to this file that is listed in the action with this method. So if it's post, it's gonna get sent hidden from the user through a file without the data. So before we close our form, that's usually where you put your submit button. So input type equals submit, and then you give it a value. Whatever is in the value is going to be the text that appears on the button. So for example, I can say submit, right? And when I refresh, notice that the submit button appears right there. By default, labels and input do not follow um, the block kind of style. Okay, they um, they just occupy as much space as they need, and then anything else you put go to the next, go to like the end of the line. Now we can do this with these in CSS and make them display block. If we change the display block to these elements, they will occupy an entire line by themselves, so every element will go to their own line. But because I'm not doing CSS right now, just, to make it simple, we'll use a break tag, and the submit button will go down. So again, whatever I type in value will match the submit button. When I click on submit, notice it's going to try to go to the file called process.php. Of course, it's going to say file not found. In order to actually get PHP to work, you must have a server running. So we are not going to really see anything today on that side. Okay, we're just going to deal with creating the form. So there we go. We have a submit button. So it would send the form. Now, another input that I want to show you is password. So label 4 equals password. That's what I want to call it. And we're going to type password over here, right? As I explained before, we're going to put the input inside of the label. So input type equals password. That's the name of it. And we'll provide an ID. We can call it password as well. And the name, we also will call it password. All right. Again, by the way that I just explained, password is going to appear right next to username. and then it doesn't have space, so it goes down, right? So we can put a BR for now. For now, just as you're creating this, again, you should deal with this in CSS, right? How it looks. So there we go. We have password field. So notice here my username, right? Whatever I want to type. And then notice that password, when I type the password, let's say 12345 6, notice that it's hidden. Depending on the browser, it's going to give you this view button that allows you to see. Not all browsers do that, okay? But nowadays, they are starting to. In case you're on the phone and you're not sure you type the right thing. This does not secure your password in any way as far as the database is concerned. All this does is hide the text that you're typing from the person sitting right next to you or looking over your shoulder. That's the only person that's going to protect you from. It doesn't really protect you from anything else. You still need to encrypt the password in your PHP file if you're going to process it. And, you still have to do security things to ensure that this password is protected whenever it gets sent. So input type equals password. I forgot to put a placeholder here. Placeholder, enter a password. Oops, enter a password. Okay, and again, refresh. This will show enter a password until you type something. Now, on the password field, you might find useful to put a few extra attributes. One attribute that's very nice is minimum length. I believe it's minimum length. And let's say 4. For example, let me save. So let me say I put 2, right? 1 and 2. Please lengthen this text to 4 characters or more. You're currently using 2. The error message is going to be different depending on the browser. Okay, so that you meet this requirement. You could also provide a maximum length if you want to. The problem with using this, the browser or the HTML security checks, is that they're not really that secure. They're secure for a person that doesn't know how to do web stuff. A person that knows how to do web stuff can bypass these checks on your form. So when we're doing security checks, we have to do security checks usually on the HTML from the first level, then on the JavaScript, mostly for making it look nicer, and then finally on the PHP to actually secure the data and make sure that the data is correct. So we do security checks all over the place, all right? Security is very important with this. So username and password so far. All right, next we'll create another BR tag. Um, Next we could have something like an email, label for email. um maybe email should go first, but it's okay. I'm just trying to show you all the different tags, a label like that, and then once again it's gonna follow the same format. Input type equals email. Okay, ID equals email, and then name equals email. And then we can put that placeholder text that says enter your email, all right, or enter a email, whatever you want to tell the user. Again, these are all self-closing tags. So when you refresh, here you go, enter your email. Now the email is interesting because if I type something, right, let's say TE, and I click submit, it says, please include an @ in the email address. TE is missing the @ Again, this will show differently depending on the browser that you are using. Okay, these messages are browser based. If you want a different message, then we deal with JavaScript. But the thing is, this just requires a @ So I click submit, uh, enter part following the @. So I'll say 1, and it works. It goes through. All right. So it doesn't actually check if it's an email. It's just checking, does it have an @. That's why, to confirm that your email is valid, websites, whenever you sign up, will send you a confirmation email. The only way to validate whether a person's email is valid is to send an email to that email address and to get the user to click on confirm. That shows that yes, you had access to that email. All right, so the label and some of the inputs. Now, what we can do, we can also provide a field set. A field set allows us to kind of put the data together in a way that is a little bit more organized. So notice I'm taking my 3 fields that I created so far and I'm putting a field set around it. Notice it puts this little box around that data. I can also provide no, that's for a table. Um, I'm sorry, I forgot what tag we use for this, but it's okay. Let me see if I have it here. No, I don't have it here. So I'm gonna use this opportunity to show you how to access W3 Schools. So w3schools.com is a website that I use a lot for referencing. And it's okay to use, it's okay to reference. In fact, I allow this on like my exams because it's a reference. You're not supposed to memorize every single tag in the world. Sometimes you need a reference, so this gives you that reference. So we can go here, W3 Schools, learn HTML, and then you can scroll through to find what you need. So in this case, we're dealing with forms, so I'm gonna click there and look at the example. So as I scroll down, there's different things that it shows you and etc. Now the one that I want probably is under form elements. There you go. Field set, it's legend. That's what I was looking for. Um, I know that because I do it a lot, but notice we have a field set and the legend element. The field set element is used to group related data in a form. The legend element defines a caption for the field set. That's why I thought it was caption at first. So we want a legend. The legend goes right below the field set. Tag. So right here, I'll put legend, and it's just a piece of text that explain what this part of the form is. So we can say, account information like that. And when I go back to the page, refresh, notice that it just puts this text right here along the border. You can change how it looks on CSS once again. All right, so that creates a few parts of the form. I'm gonna create another field set to keep things a little organized here. So that's another container, and we're gonna provide a legend, and this legend is, now we're gonna say, survey. I don't know. and refresh, and there you go. Now we're gonna give people a survey type of thing, right? Now, what I want to do is I want to create some questions like a multiple choice questions with radio buttons that we can click on. Those are the circular radio buttons. So remember that when we're doing a radio button, if you think of all the times you use the website, when you click on a radio button, you cannot click on another one on that same question. You can only pick one of them. If you pick the other one, right, it's going to go to that other radio button instead. So we have to keep that in mind while we're coding. We have to have a way to make sure that all the radio buttons in the question are part of that group. So the first thing is I'm going to create a little paragraph. Notice I'm not creating a label yet because I'm going to create a multiple choice question. We don't want to click on the question and have one of the buttons be selected. That's not the goal. Each button will be associated with an answer, and the answer is the label for that button. So the question will go in a paragraph. And I'm not sure what we want to ask. Let's say, I don't know, what's your favorite uh, movie from the following list? I don't know. What's your favorite color from the following list? All right, there we go. So that's the question. So the question will appear here. And then we want a list of possible answers, right? So in order to do that, usually the radio button appears first. So we're gonna create a label, and the label is, I'm gonna call this answer one, or not even answer one, choice one, because we're gonna pick one of them, right? It could be answer one, it's up to you. So label for that, and backslash label to close it, all right? So the first thing I'm gonna place here is I'm gonna make sure that there is some indentation here. So it's the input. So we say input type equals radio. That's what we call the circles. And we're gonna have an ID. The ID for this is gonna be choice one. Now, the name, differently from what we've done so far, for a radio button, the name should be different than the ID. And the reason is because the ID represents one of the choices. The name represents where we're going to store the choice, like a variable, right? Like it's going to hold a value. And to make sure that all the radio buttons are part of the same group, the name of them needs to match. So in this case, the name should be more like something associated with the question. So I'm gonna call it fave color, right? Fave color. Put fave color. So what's your fave color, right? So that's what I'll put here as the name because it identifies that. But the ID is not related to the question. The ID is related to the answer. So that should be choice one or something like that. It could even be the name of the color, for example. That might make more sense. So let's call this blue. Let's call this blue, for example. All right, label for blue. So name equals fave color. And in this case, there shouldn't be any placeholders because it's a circle. There's no text that you place there. Now, so that's self-closing. And then after it, you put the name, blue. So I'll refresh and notice that blue shows. And if I click on the word blue, the circle actually gets picked. All right. So that's the first one. The second choice will be the same thing. For equals, again, you could put something like choice 2, but if you want to be more descriptive, you might even say the name of the color. The label for yellow is, and then we close that label, and we put an input here. Input type equals, once again, it's gonna be radio. ID equals yellow, and name equals. Now again, the name must match fave color. It must match the other one because they are part of the same group. If they were part of different questions, then you would simply name them differently because they are part of a different question. But all the ones within the same question must have the same name, because now I can go blue, yellow, blue, yellow. I can pick between them. All right. I'll probably put a BR here to keep it going below. There you go, blue, yellow. All right, and you can keep adding choices. Right, so I'm just gonna copy and paste here to save some type. The next one might say green, all right? And the only thing that changes is that ID. Okay, green, there we go. I'll put a BR besides them. All right, and then you can keep adding colors as you want. Oops, cancel. All right, so that's that legend, label input, and then this input is radio. All right, so we got that part. Now sometimes you're going to have uh, questions in which there could be multiple answers. In those cases, you want to use a checkbox. All right. Oh, before I go on, sorry. Before we go to checkbox, um, you might want to select um, an option here already. Usually it's very common that a form will have a pre-selected option. In case the user doesn't feel like filling out that form, at least have a, usually you should choose the most common option that you know almost every user is gonna pick anyway, and you should make that your default if you need that answer to be provided and you want to decrement the hassle to the users. So let's say I want blue to be checked. So I can put the keyword checked right next to it. So if I put the keyword checked on that input, it's going to select it automatically. So every time I refresh, blue is already selected. The person can then pick something else. But if they don't feel like clicking on the things, and they just click submit, blue will already be there. So that can be useful for certain situations to already have it selected. So you can do that by putting the keyword checked. Since I'm talking about that, you can also make things required. Let's say you must provide a username. We can put the keyword anywhere in that tag called require. It's an attribute that doesn't need the equal sign. If you type the attribute, that makes the attribute true. If you don't type it, then it means it's false, that it's not required. So it's required with a D, that's the name. So if I put required, now if I try to submit this form without, oh, I didn't refresh the page and I don't know if I saved. So let me refresh again. So A at A and then click submit. Notice, please fill out this field. It's required. Again, if you want to highlight it red or put a like asterisk next to it, that means you need CSS to do those things. All right, anyway, the last thing that I want to show you is the checkbox. So let's say here the question is pick your favorite movie genres, or no, which of the following movie genres are you interested on? right? Maybe the person is signing up for, I don't know, Netflix or something, and you want to see recommendations for these categories, right? So now the user could select nothing if they don't want to, or they can select multiple. So in this case, much like the radio button, we're gonna use the checkbox. So again, usually it's the checkbox first, followed by the label after. So label for equals, and again, you can put choice 1, choice 2, choice 3, answer 1, answer 2. You can put some type of code, or you can just name it as the option would be. So let's say the first one is adventure, or let's go alphabetically. Auction, right? For action, not auction, action. Um, like that. And what we're gonna put inside it, again, it's an input, type equals, and checkbox is what it's called. And the same thing applies as it applied up there. So in this case, we're gonna say ID equals. So the ID must match your answer choice. So in this case, action, and the name must match the question. Now, if we just put all of them the same name, I'm gonna show you what happens. Um, so we can't just have them with the same name. So let's call it generous, right? That's the name of the question. I'll just leave it like that for now, but this is wrong. Okay, I'll show you why in a second. And let's call it action. So again, notice that it's there. Oops, I forgot to close the label, and there we go. The submit goes below now. So action, right? So then BR, right, to put that break in, and I'll create it once more by hand, for adventure, label for adventure, and then backslash label, input type equals checkbox, ID equals, we're gonna, again, the ID should match the answer, which is adventure, and the name should match the question. But again, this right now is wrong, adventure. All right. Why is it wrong? If I set them with the exact same name, it's not gonna work. If I actually, I lied. It's working. It's working right here, but it's not gonna work when it gets submitted. If they have the same name, we can't retrieve them on PHP. All right, we can't retrieve them on PHP because each genre will have its kind of its own, like it will get overwritten. If I pick action, then adventure, and then submit, the genre gets submitted. So what you'll see in some tutorials is people will put 1 and 2. Genre is 1, genre is 2. These will allow to create two variables that will have two separate values in case the people pick both. However, that's good, but that gives you more work when you're dealing with PHP. So in my opinion, the easiest way to do it is actually to put a square bracket at the end of a checkbox input. Um, name, genres, and then brackets. For those of you who have done programming before, you might notice that, isn't that how we create an array? Yes, it is. An array is a variable that holds multiple values. And by putting these square brackets right here, that causes the variable to be an array. What that means is if I select multiple things, when I retrieve it in PHP, I'll have all the values stored in it as a list, as an array, right? So that helps out the PHP so much. It makes life so much easier. You don't have to go checking for all the different numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, like it makes life so much easier. So if your um input is a checkbox, just name it with a square bracket at the end, and the name itself can be the same for all of your um, labels. So, and then we can, we can put others, a horror movie, right? Horror or suspense or whatever. You can add as many ones as you want. Just follow that same guideline. So then refresh, there you go. You can pick more. And you can add as many as you want, right? Um, there is no kind of limitation there. Of course, you want to try to make it as quick as possible for the user to fill out that information, because the longer they're spending there, the more stress they might get. So those are the most common form elements that you can use. Again, I'll post these slides as well on our Blackboard shell, and you can check out, you know, those. Notice that same thing here with the square brackets. Actually, there I also do a select. Fine, let's do a select. We're already here. So the last one is the select. Now the select works differently, so it's good to go over. I'll put these after the email. After the email of the person, I want to ask them to provide their state. So I'm gonna say select. Select is a container. What happens is in a select, what you're gonna have is you're gonna have a group of options in a Dropbox, right, that you can select from. So we're gonna have that select statement. Now for the select statement, we can put it in a label. So we'll say a label for state like that. Um, and we'll close the label like that. So then we have our select. Now the select should have an ID and a name, because that's the box, right? So select ID equals state, and they match, name equals state. So that there you go. Now, if I refresh my page, it's right here. It's empty though. So after email, let's put a BR. And inside of the label, let's say state, the word state. There we go. So there is the box. There's nothing on it though. To add things to this box, we have to add options. All right. So each of these options will have two things, a value and whatever you want it to be typed in. So let's say the value is NJ. We want to display New Jersey like that. So now New Jersey appears, right? Let's say we want New York, option value equals NY. And then we'll say New York. So the text that we type in between the option tag, that's the text that appears here. And the value that we provide, NJ and Y, that's what's gonna get sent to the PHP file in the action. So it would get NJ or NY, whichever one you picked, right? And you can add as many options as you want, all right? You can add as many options as you want. The New Jersey and New York are just here to help the user know what, to give something more meaningful. But what gets passed to the database is, or to the action file is NJ and NY, because it's just easier to store smaller values like that. All right. So that's the idea here. That's how you create a form. Now, again, to make it work to receive the data, you need some more things in place that might require a little bit of programming, or might require you to set up the form in a certain way. If you have um, if you created it from a website on a website that allows you to create websites. But that's the overall idea here. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions and you don't understand why I did something, please just send me an email, let me know, and I'll be happy to clarify. All right. Um, Take care, and I'll see you next time. Oops. Um, Take care, and I'll see you next time.